Great.
Okay, then.
And Cecilia, will you share the slides?
Yes. Well, first, thank you everybody for being here. Even if these are complicated dates. As we all know, some of us are on holiday, others are, yeah. Do you see the
Wrapping
screen?
up a busy
Okay.
academic year and dealing with lives and jobs.
And the end of term and so on. So we have decided this is the last time we do it in June.
Well, although I don't know if there is ever a quieter time, but anyway, so really appreciate it and nice to see you all. Welcome to this meeting of the DESIS cluster that we are now calling Design from the Margins. Actually, at the last meeting, we taught to focus on the concept of marginalized people and the innovation that comes from being in the margins. The previous title was Practice and Education Design for Social Change from the Margins, which was quite long. So we decided to shorten it as Design from the Margins. And the topic of today is about being caught in the crossfire. We would like to, as Cecilia said, just to catch up before the end of this academic year and to remind ourselves about the goals of this cluster that we have launched some time ago now. So we see this as a safe space to share experiences amongst us in this emerging area of work that is about practice and education in design for social change from the margin, bridging students with marginalized communities, but also fostering opportunities for networking and possibly collaborating with each other to contribute to certain outputs. And as well, at the last part of this meeting, we'd like to discuss with you what type of outputs we want to produce. We know that in a way, it's very emerging, this working group, and it's still very organically growing, but at some point, and it's been great to meet and just have a space to discuss, but possibly we also thought it's good to have an aspiration and something to work towards together. We also wanted to update you on what we've done so far since last time we met. We presented at the DESIS Assembly. We also had 3 online meetings. The first one was last autumn. That was actually very much an open call to see who is interested in getting involved in this type of work. And it was amazing to see how much desire and commitment and enthusiasm there is. So we are growing a community around this. The second online meeting was focused on reframing vulnerability and actually challenging the word vulnerable people, because actually we need to move towards a more assets-based approach. And that's where we also discussed to frame this work on design from the margins. And today we are focusing on the theme of being caught in the crossfire. As well, we'll have some slides to explain what we mean. And also just to share how this is also emerged. We will explain this in a second. Also, we were at the ESDA DESIS Days in Zaragoza in Spain on the 11th and 12th of March, where some of us were there in person, me, Cecilia, Alberto, Lorraine, who is here. We also had Susan, Kanan, and Bori, and Yankee Lee. So it was a great opportunity to meet in person and continue these conversations. And then also we delivered a workshop at Cumulus Budapest in May. Yes, so as I mentioned, some of us presented in person at the DESIS Days in Zaragoza. There were talks, one by Lorraine on design against crime, and also Yankee Lee on more than human. We also had some workshops. Nico Zuleles from Cyprus facilitated a workshop on embedding sustainable development goals in the curriculum. And then there was a workshop facilitated by myself, Lorraine, and Yankee on sharing co-design methods on design for social change. And also we facilitated a panel discussion, bringing all and discussing all the insights emerging from the 2 days. And then Cecilia and I, together with Bori Feher from Mobe University and Jonathan Ventura from the Social Design Network, we co-founded a Cumulus working group on design education for social change, which is a partnership between DESIS, the Social Design Network, and Cumulus. In fact, in the Cumulus network, there are several working groups, but there was nothing focused on design education for social change, so we decided to set it up. It is, in a way, an overlap with our thematic cluster, but it's also important for us to be part of this international network. And as you can see here from this picture, we facilitated a workshop on design education social change. We were actually the busiest workshop of the whole Cumulus Budapest. We had over 30 participants in person, plus some online. That shows actually there is a great interest and demand in this area of work. And we started to share experiences, but also discuss how do we want to work together and also what we want to produce. And for instance, some of the ideas emerging from this workshop was to create a repository of sharing case studies, but also starting from a glossary of terms around these topics and so on. So as well, we wanted to share some initial outcomes of this DESIS cluster. Based on this initial conversation, I'm very grateful for Anne-Laure, who invited me to be a mentor at the Design Jam at Nova SBE in Portugal in February. Then Cecilia was invited by Francesca Piredda and Davide Fassi to be a visiting researcher at Polyme in July in their DESIS lab. And also at Cumulus Budapest, we met other people connected to DESIS, like Albert, who is here today, but also Ana Ferreira, Kanan, Miao Seng, Emilia Duarte, and many others. And actually that experience at Cumulus Budapest, there was a DESIS event as a panel debate on bridging different cultures, working across borders. And that discussion was very insightful and very, well, challenging to a certain extent because it's a very delicate topic, but also it was very meaningful. And that's why we decided to continue this conversation within our DESIS cluster. And that's how we decided to focus on this theme in this conversation today. Next, Cecilia. So we also talked to kind of, I mean, these meetings have been planned in quite an informal way, but we actually thought to have some more structure in this working group. So we think it would be good to have other 2 meetings by the end of this calendar year, 2024. So possibly one in September and one in November, but as well, we haven't set anything in stone. So please let us know if we should avoid certain dates. And as well, if you remember, we had sent an online form to ask you what topics you'd like to discuss in these meetings. And some of the most voted ones were going beyond design parachuting. So how we, as design educators, but also our students, often are parachuted into marginalized communities. There are issues of kind of academic tourism and also how to sustain the legacies of these interventions. And then the other is about how to negotiate or manage the power dynamics at play in those collaborative processes, bringing together students with marginalized communities, as well as many different stakeholders, and also how to manage expectations and so on. So these are some topics that have emerged that you voted, but as well, it's nothing totally fixed. We can discuss this later on today. And then as well, Cecilia renews her invite to meet in person at the ESDA DESIS Days. So the next, which is the 4th edition, will take place in March 2025 in Zaragoza. So we are all invited to participate in person. You can either deliver a talk, facilitate a workshop, contribute to a panel debate, or contribute something to an exhibition or so on. So as well, there is plenty of time to plan, but as well, it's an invite for now for you to think about and maybe get in touch to see if you want to be involved. Maybe next.
Okay.
And maybe that's all from me. I will pass it to Cecilia, who can explain this topic of being caught in the crossfire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francesco, for the update. Then I'm going to try to be concise because here what's interesting for everybody is the discussion, the debate, and the opinions that we want to gather in the end in some way that we talk in the end of the meeting. So I guess many of you, when you read the topic, were a bit confused, maybe. But what we will refer to is that any of us can be caught in the crossfire. It's a very Spanish, I don't know if Italian too, expression that means el fuego cruzado, caught in the crossfire, without wanting it. Here we refer to the condition of living in a conflict area, in a refugee camp, in a crime gang, etc., without necessarily have chosen being involved in it. So we thought the cockpit was wide enough to allow for different and diverse interpretations. So I'm going to set one example for one moment. Okay, let me see. Sorry. Okay,
Hubo una muchacha que estaba pasando tranquila, se manifestaba, venían los adeptos bolivarianos, así venían y le pegaron un tiro a la muchacha. La mataron porque le dio una gana de matar. El gobierno no investiga nada de eso. Nada de eso.
Okay, I explained it. This was from Venezuela. He was a refugee with who we were working with, and he was just explaining one case that are many that they explain to students. That's it. So in some way, that girl was caught in the crossfire. Sorry. Okay. So two quotes in a more general approach to start the debate. These one are more about the image that the media deliver on conflicts. So we have this quote from Guy Debord: "Those who have not lived through such things can understand, can imagine the experiences such images represent." And after Susan Sontag, regarding the pain of others, how does the spectacle of the suffering of others affect us? Have we become used to cruelty? This couple of quotes, I think they talk about the anesthesia of being of receiving this amount of big amount of conflict images every day. Other things that Susan Sontag says is that the farther is the country with the conflict, the less is our empathy, and that normalizing conflicts, long-term conflicts, we normalize long-term conflicts. Now it's Gaza, and what happens with Ukraine, for example, when they are long time, they're in some way a little bit forgotten. Then we have this well-respected now and young philosopher in Spain, Marina Garcés, who gives one of that could be one solution or one way to start to work on this, which is the pain of the other, properly focused, can serve to unite or to separate people, to heal or to hurt. The question is what we want it to be for us. Is a way of boosting critical thinking, for example, in our students. From the surveys, from your answers to the survey, we have highlighted some of the things we can do, which is listening or active listening, as Lorraine always says, empathy, also awareness, to engage mindfully students, to make them feel safe, also to have a place to express this discomfort. Of course, co-creation and working with the people face to face in the flesh and not just in the distance or at a distance, and then working together regarding persons. This is, in my view, very important also because in their own circumstances, and not only on the whole community problems, which can be different. And then, of course, think critically about our own practice and being flexible. Now, the debate is open, so please let's discuss. I stop sharing. Who wants to start?
There was, sorry, Cecilia, there was a slide also with some prompt questions. No?
Yes, it's true.
I think we could just leave it there. Just
it's the most important one. Well, okay. Sorry, I'm gonna share it again.
And thanks for who filled in the survey. It was very insightful to see your experiences, but also, yeah, it's an opportunity. It's a space here to discuss. Do you have a, or it's not there? I don't know. Maybe the one before?
This one.
Yes. I mean, they're just prompt questions, but as well, you got, I hope, we hope you got what we want to talk about. But yeah, and as well, bringing it back to this theme, this cluster on design and education and social design, in what ways can we tackle these issues that emerge when we live in a time in which genocides, wars, migration, displacement, and other are on the rise? And as educators, how can we make our students more aware of it all? And even when we have this awareness, what can we and they do in these contexts, but also anything else? Just maybe take a moment to think about it, and feel free to raise your hand or just speak up. It's a small space, it's an intimate space, and we have the time to
Safe space.
Yes. Or also feel free to post in the chat and we will monitor it. Anyone would like to start? Anyone who filled in the form and would like to share verbally? Or how does this topic
Okay,
also?
I can start to break ice. Okay, I want to talk about my experience with refugees also, after Francesco too. The way we work with them is the second year, and it has changed a little because we have come aware that each person have, as I said before, their own circumstances. Even when they are all refugees and they have common needs, if you go inside a little deeper, you find there are ones that have run away. Of course, most of them, or what the foundation says, is that they come from climate disasters and from wars. But when you are working with there, you realize that some of them are running away from homophobia, others are running away from hunger, others are running away from woman household violence, or unwanted marriages, etc. So each person is a different case. So the way we work now is more peer-to-peer. I mean, one by one, and with the students one by one with them. So we mix them, and we try to understand each one's circumstances.
In your case, Cecilia, the students were facing the migrants, and what they were supposed to do.
Okay, in my case, and I will share one moment the screen to show you to you. What we do is a transdisciplinary work with fashion, cultural identities through fashion. So what we do is that from fashion design, they design outfits with two refugees from the same culture with two students. So they do a modern contemporary outfit, but inspired in the cultural identities. So they work together till the end of it. But we have, for example, now we have 5 different subjects involved. One of them is, for example, art history. They are working on the cultural identities. And for example, mine is photography. In the end of it all, we do may I share the one moment, the post in ESDA website? Yeah. Okay, then. So this is it. Can you see it? So here you see they are together working. They first do it a small prototype on a doll, and they work also transferring some patterns that they design on the fabrics, and they work together. So here we have For example, this is the last session that they do with me, but here you have people from, for example, he's Mohamed, who's Sub-Saharian. Then we have, for example, these are both from Colombia. Amador, they represent the forest, the wild, la selva, and the mountains in Colombia. So this is they work together with the students to design this, but also to do it, not just design it. So here we are. These are Tatiana from Ukraine. Here is from Venezuela, and Jasmine they are from Somalia. So this is it.
Anyone would like to respond, share experiences? Or maybe Cecilia, did you encounter any challenges in this process, or what did you learn? I don't know, would you like to share some?
Yes, one thing we've learned from this one, apart from each personal circumstances you have to be conscious of, is that we also have to foster the work among students from different subjects and from different levels. So it's not just the work we do with them, but this year we have seen we also have to make them work together more. I don't know. So
Sorry, nobody wants to start. Does it make sense this topic of being caught in the crossfire? But also, I mean, in my case, also, actually, well, I do also have projects bridging students with vulnerable communities, but actually as well, for me, what in my case is also about the institutional challenges in living and working in this context. So, for instance, since the genocide in Gaza has exploded, there is lots of tension also because the institution kind of is supposed to be seen as apolitical, and actually the lack of making a statement or declaring a position, many people are becoming very angry. Students have occupied Central St. Martin's, but also from all sorts. Staff and students are not very, are very discontent about this lack of a response. And in a way, even, yes, we are supposed to be a higher education institution, so maybe our core business is about education, but we can't discard the context in which we live, and also some of our students. Well, we are all, of course, I mean, in my case, I live in London. I'm not in the middle of the conflict, so I'm not really in the crossfire, but to a certain extent, we do, yeah, everybody is somehow affected. I mean, I do work with Jewish people from Israel who live here, and even if they're here and they are to a certain extent safe, they are a victim of harassment and all sorts. And of course, as well, and all parties as well, we are all vulnerable. Maybe some of us at this moment are a little bit more privileged or safer than, of course, living in the place where the war is happening. But of course, we also work with institutions and with colleagues who are affected, and as well, we believe there should be freedom of speech, and as well, institutions, especially when they declare to have a social purpose or working on such projects, we do have a role to play. And that's why for us, that's why we're asking, what is our role as design educators in this context? What can we do? How we can collaborate and with those in more vulnerable positions, and how we can contribute. Lorraine,
just to back up what you're saying. So it's a very difficult context. So Goldsmiths University in London immediately came out to support, Palestinian colleagues in education. Our own institution says they're normal, neutral. So it's very hard to create a safe space for discussion, because the space is a contested space. At the moment, our head of college, who's called Rathner, has kindly allowed the students in to occupy and manage the reception area. We're cohabiting, the reception staff are cohabiting with the students. Very nice, and it's very safe space. But they do have a poster up saying our rector is a war criminal. That makes me laugh every time I come in, I have to say. And so it's a very difficult space. So when you say like preparing materials to have a debate, I mean, contextualization is so important, because in this country there isn't a really clear narrative. So the first step for me is always about, contextualizing, and that's like not straightforward, because TV tends to present a very particular account in the UK in particular. I don't know about elsewhere. So that's really to support what you were saying, Francesco. It's a very difficult space. So to do anything feels quite radical.
Yeah, I just want to
also, sorry, just to reinforce this as well, in just sharing what was discussed at the Cumulus Budapest DESIS event, as well, there was so much, as well, it was about working across borders, and in a way, or some people even shared that their colleagues didn't want to go to Budapest because of the politics of the country. But then as well, isolating people just because of where they live as well, I think for me it's important to understand our collaborators, and eventually if there is an alignment of values, I think it's valuable to contribute. But excluding people on the basis of their nationality, often we are citizens, but maybe not always we support the values supported by our governments. And I guess even in these very challenging times, of course, as Cecilia also said, we can run the risk of becoming paralyzed, because all the amount of trauma and suffering and conflict is overwhelming. But I think even in this moment, we need to collaborate and actually design, we should bridge cultures rather than dividing them even more as we are already. Sorry, who was going to speak? I'm sorry if
I was.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. Thanks to you. I mean, I knew I didn't fulfill the survey, and I think it's my first meeting here, apart from meeting in this working group, apart from meeting in Budapest. However, Ezio, in a meeting we had mentioned about the creation of this working group. So I have like three comments. One is that I really like the term being caught in the crossfire, because I think it's like a little bit the shift between talking about homeless people and homelessness. I think that it's really nice to this term. It's a clear metaphor, a clear way to express that those with which we are working are not, don't have to be ashamed of being as they are, because for sure they've been caught in a crossfire that surpasses their capacities. And the examples of the refugees by Cecilia were really clear. This brings to the second one. I had in mind, and this conversation on the Gaza and so on, I had in mind, but maybe this was how Ezio framed it, that this was a working group that tried to, let's say, reframe one of the initial goals of DESIS, that is, okay, there are troubles everywhere, there are many things happening in the world, but there are some people that are more in the margins, that need more help than others. And I think that was fair. And as you know, I was working for 3 or 4 years in Barcelona on that with Ezio. And yeah, I think that this is a really nice point to say, okay, having an event in a square in the center of Barcelona might be nice, might be social innovation, but maybe is not really focusing on those who really need us to put effort on. So yeah, again, I think that it's a really nice framing of something that maybe because we are designers, maybe because some of us work in posh design schools or whatever, but to recover this idea that, hey, there are some people that may need more of our part than others, which I think it's great. And the third thing, just to add my comments, and because I will have to jump out before the meeting ends. Of the things that were raised from the survey, and this some of you know already, I think that it's difficult because the vulnerable group is here, vulnerable individual. The term being caught into a crossfire highlights the fact that maybe this is because higher or other layers are interacting for him or he or she or whoever to become vulnerable. But of the things you raised as things designers could do, many of them were reflect, raise awareness, be critical. And I think that designers have to do things apart from being aware, from reflecting, be critical, and raise awareness. We have the capacity to design. And maybe we don't design a mobile phone, or maybe we don't design a car, but we have to. So I would only like to highlight that of the 8 or 10 verbs that were on the slide, maybe only one was related to the distinct and special capacity we have in design schools that many other schools in the world, business schools, philosophy schools, social science, don't have. That is that we do things for better and for bad, of course, for good and for bad, but we do things. So I would suggest to move to the forefront of the group this capacity to design. That is what we educate our students to. Those were my 3 comments.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Beatrice?
Yes, so it took me a little while just because it's such a powerful topic, and even the title itself, it made me think so much, and my head was kind of trying to untie the knot. So I hope I'm being clear on my thoughts. But actually, the topic or the theme of Crossfire, for me, it kind of brings a duality to it, just because I feel like it kind of shows, it depends, it builds itself on the narrative that we choose. So in one hand, we may have a passive avoidance perspective, and on another hand, an active engagement. On the passive perspective, I feel that we also use it in Portugal, and it aligns a little bit with the Western perspective that kind of emphasizes avoiding conflict, seeking safety, steering clear of danger zones. So I feel it can be interpreted as a passive stance where we don't get much action, but with the right narrative, I also feel like it can also be reflective of an active engagement to confront the issues. So head on, instead of just avoiding them. It just depends on how we contextualize the topic itself and how we present it itself, especially because most of us also represent a Westernized perspective. So I feel it's important for us to take these under consideration. And about what Alberto was also saying about the schools, I feel like not only design, but I feel like designing perspectives, it can be in any context. For example, our DESIS lab is in a business school. So I feel it has also the power, but it's about creativity and how we present different contexts and different perspectives of design to the group that we intervene with. And it's good that it's just not only in design schools, because otherwise we would only be restricting the power of people. So I feel like if we get to more schools and more education, high institutions, that can be seen in a different way, and we have also more power and more voice. Yeah, so this is just the thing that came to my mind. I hope I was clear on my point. It's such a powerful topic and something that it would make me think the whole day about it and reflect about it. So in this short term, this was what it came to me and I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
And Laura, in fact, yeah, what if we get business school students to do it? And
also to think critically, because sometimes they also miss that. So, you know, we need to give them both, I think. I just wanted to thank you, Beatrice. I really like the passive and active thing. I was just wondering about, like, you know, what you were mentioning, both Lorraine and Francesco, about the, you know, being in an institution that doesn't necessarily support whatever you're trying to do, and you know, you have to navigate the politics of it, and knowing where you stand. And I was also thinking, because you were talking about in Budapest the cross-cultural part, and so I feel like, you know, Francesco, you say, you know, I'm not British and I'm in London, and it's the same for me, and I've been for many years, and so it's sometimes it's also hard to know where you, how to interpret. So for example, you know, I worked a long time in the US, and there's a lot of students who've been voicing their disagreement with the US politics, and in France, where I was born, same thing. And in Portugal, I haven't really seen it. So I've been doing some research, and I learned from students, that some students, that it does exist, but it's less visible. And because we're in our school, like, it's like, I think they chose the passive interpretation of Crossfire, Beatrice. And so there's like no mention, like nobody, like, it's very interesting. Like, to me, it's like a void, a silence, which is like scary. But then, you know, you don't know how to talk. So we had one lunch with some students with Beatrice, where we had a very safe space, and I asked them, you know, I prompted the questions because they were Portuguese students. So I wanted to know, you know, what do Portuguese students, you know, do, like, in terms of like their position. And probably we also, you know, selected students who by default were maybe more prone to be proactive. But it's been like, you know, again, it's about how do you navigate, and even how do you take a stance. And like, for example, at NYU, where I was back in May, it's clear you can't say a word. Like, if not, you know, you become, I don't know, an activist or whatever. I mean, you can't say a word, but like, you know, you're getting into, you know, politics of the place, because the school has a very strong view, which I guess is the same thing for you guys in London. But here it's like silence, but it doesn't help either, because you don't even know. The Crossfire is even more dangerous, because you have no clue how to do it, you know, and you kind of, even a little prompt like, oh, and with what's happening these days, you know, and people are looking at you like, what is really happening these days? Like, so I don't know, I feel it's also interesting to think about the context, but also sometimes knowing where people are against or for certain topics helps. So I was thinking about this passive, you know, active view of Crossfire, and when you are in like a very passive one, you don't know where you're going.
Mm-hmm. And also thanks also for bringing about activism. And in a way, well, even in the DESIS network, we always discuss the design, the activist role of the designer. And of course, also designers play a political role. So, and you mentioned safe space, and I always wonder what are the ingredients for creating a safe space? Possibly ethics, but many other things, and trust, relationships, but or certain qualities as well, maybe like intangible and in us implicitly, but it's very difficult to spell them out and maybe also replicate. Sorry, Cecilia, what are you saying?
Yes, I wanted to also, after unlearn, in my case, we work in a public university, so we have we can talk, but we don't talk. I mean, there's also an absolute indifference in students who are only worried about if they're passing the exam, if they're passing the subject. Maybe someone is even coming crying because she won't pass this year. Blah, blah, blah. So, but in a way, we had the opportunity of have some optional subjects on guerrilla design. There's this fanzine way of also protesting in some way. We had activist design, which is what also always talks about Francesco. But the thing is, we also have students that are aware of it, the less of them, that are, for example, in campus university, they are camping against Gaza's war and so on. But the thing is, if we come, for me, it's more difficult. If we come to make them aware of the situation, then what would we do? Because I myself don't know what to do. I mean, we can say our students, this is happening. This is what has happening now is as strong as if there were concentration camps with Nazis, because it's happening now. And we didn't live that era, but we are living this one now. So what can we do from design? I would ask also Albert, what design can do for this? Which is not just activism, fanzine and things to protest, but go further, maybe creating, as Lord said, critical thinking in our students. It's very interesting, but what else?
Well, getting your question, I think that, and we discussed with Edge and Elisava colleagues for years down in Elisava. And sorry, Beatriz, I didn't know you come from a business school, which is great. No prejudices. So, yeah, I mean,
but I have an arts background, so
okay,
in the middle.
that's it. So I'm more relaxed now. No, don't worry. No, I mean, this my position, and this is what I pushed a lot to happen at Elisava while I was for 10 years the academic director there, and I'm trying to push now from Glasgow up here in the Highlands. I think that designers have clear skills that are clearly different to many other fields, and that we all know that this has been part of capitalist consumerism and many things we can discuss about, but this doesn't mean that these tools are bad, essentially. So doing things, building things, producing things is not bad, is not fundamentally bad. So I think that there's a reflection on in which measure design for social innovation and design for vulnerable communities or vulnerable individuals, as you're suggesting now, there's to use, let's say, to keep on using the typical skills and competencies and even production forces that design has. And for example, we do that maybe because we don't understand the physical dimension of it, but we do it immediately while doing an app. So an app, a digital application. None of us would have any doubt to design an app for social innovation. But we have more doubts to design something. Why? The only reason is because the app, we consider that it's only this, and we don't put in all the energy and material footprint an app brings. And this is the only reason why we are open to design an app for social innovation, but not that open to design a car for social innovation, because we consider that cars or clothes, as you showed, Cecilia, are clearly part of the market process and clearly impacting the production and so on. So that's it. I think that the typical things designers have done for 1 century can be those that we keep on doing, focusing on positive impact on vulnerable. So of course, a campaign to raise awareness, it's part of the things that designers do, but it's not only. Reflect or bring critical activism to raise awareness on something are parts of the things that designers do, but not only. We do cars as well, and clothes and shoes and many other things. That's what I wanted to, well, that's what I've been trying to highlight for a while.
Thank you. Well, to be honest, just sharing as well, I work in fashion, but I use fashion as a vehicle for social change. And we do make stuff, but actually I'm more interested in the process because as well, during the making of things, we learn skill, we discover ourselves, we represent our identity, we create cultures and so on. So yeah, just wanted to highlight this part. I can see that Ezio has a hand up, so please over to you.
So, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to see you here. And who knows me? I don't know if I don't know everybody, but I know some of you knows that I'm very interested in the fact that this thematic cluster exists, and I did something to help the process. At the same time, I said, and I will repeat now for all the other, given that I am a kind of grandfather of design for social innovation, I don't want to enter in this discussion too much, because I think that there could be something new that appear that maybe is not only different from the traditional design for social innovation, but also different for a certain way of dealing with this. So I like to say something because I think that is correct, but yeah, it's one possible contribution. So first of all, one thing that tell me that it's interesting to do things in a different way than I would do is the title of this meeting, because in the Crossfire is something that it's not so logical. So it do not come from I've done something and therefore it comes out that we are in the Crossfire, but everybody feel that there is something in this term that could be stimulating, that could be interesting, that could be part of what for me is so important, and also Albert was saying before, to try in some way to move social innovation from a kind of comfort zone in which it started. And the majority of the cases that, as has been said again by Albert, if we do something in the neighborhoods in the center of Barcelona or in Olo in Milano or in other places like this, it's in a comfort zone. Everything is relatively near to the students, relatively safe, relatively obvious that there is something that could be done, etc., etc. If you move away from this comfort zone, everything starts to become difficult. And I also will tell this thing because this is a good, the example of the Crossfire for me is a good example that is very good for people as me of my age, not to talk so much, because maybe there could be some good ideas that I will never think about. So, for instance, this issue of the Crossfire for me is a very powerful image of talking about one of the mantra of this the last 10, 20 years has been designed in the network of relationships. So everything is related with everything else. We are in the middle of this kind of mesh of relationships. So this issue about design for social innovation is mainly a way to deal with relationships, is something that we all agree. The only thing that is, until now, when we say relationships, we look to what we would like to have, that are relationship of care, relationship of attention, relationship of empathy, etc., etc. And therefore, we try to see situation in which this is in that direction. But relationship could be also very negative, or very angry, or relationship in between enemies. So for me, at least, talking about being in the middle of this fire is not only when you are really talking about people dealing with people living in the middle of the battle, because you are in one of the places, or unfortunately many places where there are wars in this moment. But it could be extended to the idea of what does it mean to consider that everything is related with everything else, that we live in this mesh of relationships. But unfortunately, the relationship could also not to be so nice, not to be so smooth, not to be so empathic. And this is, in my view, could be the relationship turned from being very good, we are in the middle of very good relationships, as all the rhetoric that I think I said something like this 1 million times, but the relationship could be also a relationship of enemy or somebody that can metaphorically or not metaphorically kill you. So I think that this idea of being the crossfire is an interesting way. So even though it's not so easy now to go on, but I think that it's a very good start point, because it positions ourselves in a situation in which we are in some way discussing the mainstream, not mainstream, because not everybody is talking about relationships, but the main way of talking about relationship, considering that the relationships are not necessarily good, nice, smooth, etc., etc. Given that, so this is only applauding and say this has been a very nice, very useful, not only nice, potentially useful choice. And I could stop here. I could make a proposal. So I think that one of the characteristics of all the DESIS activity has been to be project-based. So to make reflection, so it's a reflective activity that is based on some projects. Of course, the topic can be taken also by different point of view, different starting point, etc. But what, at least for me, and I hope that this will remain, is in common, that we are trying to generate some knowledge through the reflection on some projects. So, in my view, what will be the best if you have not already done, or if you do already done, to go on, having examples that can permit to start to classify in some way and permit the conversation to go on, because I will not impose maybe my too much rationalistic way of structuring the conversation. Maybe the conversation can be also be more open, maybe in some way messy, but maybe at the same time generative. But if we have some cases and we try to see what could be criteria to evaluate these cases, and try in this way to separate, I can give you only one example, just not to be so abstract. If you have a refugee camp and somebody say what design can do, of course, you can do at least, there are two categories of things that can be done. One is, no, as a human being, you can do also something else, but as a designer, you can support, as with your design tools, a campaign that try to make this camp more visible, and more visible the human beings that are inside. So in some way, to make a campaign that permit to the people that is living nearby to recognize who is living there, the human being, but etc. This is a way to use our design tool to support some political action, direct political action. It could also be, it happens that there is a movement and we collaborate with the movement, creating what is needed. And the movement has a lot of need of things that could be the political movement, I mean, from advertising toward the digital things, toward performances, everything could be useful for this. So this is one category. And this category has to be seen, and has to be seen what are the difficulties to do it, etc., etc. Another category is if we enter as designers in the daily life. So in my wording, it will be from politics, political politics, to the politics of every day. So using our design capability to make something happen in the life of these people in the way that their life could be better. In my view, already these are two different things, and are also very different by the point of view of the difficulties, and also in some way the intensity of the Crossfire, because the first one is much more professional. So instead of working for whoever, you're working for this movement, and therefore you are working in some way from outside. You use your tools. This, in my view, is not to be done because it's not so much. It's very important. There is a lot of things to do, and this is super important. The other one is more complex because really to work for the daily life of these people, so to use our design capabilities to try to help them to live better, to increase their own power and their own freedom, and maybe to have also some practical support, you have to be a higher interaction and understand better. I don't know if this makes sense, but this is a very rough division that I will not say that is a polarity, because you could have something in which these two ways of working can mix, but it could be helpful to better understand what are the difficulties. But for sure, if we go more inside and if we had 10, 20, 50 cases, we can see much more what are the difficulties and in which way they represent themselves, because otherwise, I think that the conversation that we have had until now today is useful because we have to start, and it's useful. I hope that people can pass through also a certain degree of messiness, because we are really trying to put our feet on the ground that is really slippery and very difficult only to be discussed. But in my view, the best way is to collect cases and to look together to the cases and to try to start to define different conditions, different way of doing, different way in which the different actors, because the actors are the people that are really on the margin. There are the students and the teacher. There are the institutions, the school as institution and other institutions. So every proposal get a different kind of combinations in the relationships in between them. So this is my very banal, modest proposal. Is let's collect some cases and put them together and try to find some way to not to classify for the sake of classification, but for the sake of permitting the conversation to go on, because otherwise the conversation do not go on, because then, okay. This is my small contribution, and thanks for your enthusiasm in doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Ezio. Also, as you were speaking, several other things I wanted to highlight. In a way, I guess also everyone, and I think we discussed in the other meeting when we talked about reframing vulnerability as well, the fact that we, at any moment in time and in place, we can all be vulnerable, and as well we should allow and be open to our own vulnerabilities, and actually being vulnerable can give an opportunity for change. For instance, when I set up my student project brief, bringing students to work with refugees, at the same time when I launched the course, the conflict exploded, and of course there were very heavy emotions, and students felt very vulnerable. But actually at the end of this process, they also said, actually this process allowed me the safe space to then turn my vulnerability into change, into a process of transformation. Or even one of the refugee collaborators, she said that she feels the project helped her transform her pain into something beautiful, like art. And then as well, in a way, I think, yeah, I agree with the fact that there is a shift, I guess, even in design for social innovation and the DESIS network, because as you say, the ground is very slippery. And I think, but there is an urgency, I think, now. And that's why we really, I think we have a responsibility to be responsive actually to this context that's changing. And for me, I always find an answer in reflecting on my own values, and also when starting collaborations. I think if there is an alignment of values, that's where things can happen. And I know, yeah, I agree that sometimes actually design for social innovation has been criticized for seeking consensus, but as you say, pluralism and dissent also can be very producive of change. I guess in a way what Hetty was also saying, yeah, it makes lots of sense, the different possibilities. And as well, to me, it reminds me your paper about the classification of professional design, diffuse design, or actually the one in the middle is co-design. So still, I think it's a very well way of looking at this. And finally, as well, I think, yeah, as well, there are several scales of transformation, I think, and maybe some projects are more about raising awareness of these issues. Then there is the ideation phase, and then there is shift. So actually how we can contribute to systemic change. But I'm mindful of the time, and we actually, and as well, I like your idea of collecting cases, which could be potentially lead to the next phase of this conversation where we want to discuss what can we do next. But maybe just before we move into the next part, later, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I just wanted to make sure, do you want to contribute? Or also, it's also fine just to listen, but
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure everybody has space to talk. And then
Thank
both.
you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, nice to meet you all. I'm Leire. I'm a former ESDA student. And yeah, today, yeah, Cecilia introduced me to the group, and today is my first meeting, and today I just wanted to listen to you all and watch. And then if I think I'm able to add something useful, I will. But today I'm just listening to you.
Okay.
I say one thing. Thank you. It's great to have former students and students also in here. Just one thing. I think for the first, the After FTO idea of examples is super important and super useful, because then we see the things in real, all these theoretical things that are floating, then we see them. And then the second is not to forget that in the former meeting, the idea of calling the design for social change from the margins, it was because it was not for the margins, because it was not for people who is in the margins, but from the margin. And this is very interesting in the way I think we should go ahead, or we should go to absolutely dive in it, which is why this social innovation we have talked about, Ezio, Alberto, that began in downtown with people, medium class people and so on. Why don't we try to get from these people who are, or who we can be there also, as Francesco says, make them do social innovation too. I mean, we have to learn from them. We have to ask them. We have to do active listen. We have to put them to design too. I think this could be one of the goals of it all. No.
Mindful of the time, shall we move? Do you want to share the slides again? So, well, next, I mean, of course, we can talk about this forever, I guess, but maybe we wanted also to be a bit practical as well. We thought it's nice to have this space where we can just talk and share experiences, but we'd like also to see that there is momentum and we can kind of work towards something collectively. So, as well, something that maybe is not in this slide, actually as an output from the meeting at DESDA, we decided to work together towards a supplement of the Discern journal that is edited by Nico Zuleles. So we are, each of us who went there, including Cecilia, Lorraine, myself, Boris, Susan, and Yankee, I hope I didn't forget anyone, we'll write some short reflections for for this supplement of Discern, which will be published in November. And that's a concrete output, but we want to discuss with you what are our future goals, what would you like to achieve, what you'd like to work together towards. For instance, a web page, an exhibition, a future publication, and as well, it can be, especially of a journal, it can be something more not for an academic audience, it could be a DESIS booklet or anything else. As well, we'd like to hear from you what you like to do. And maybe what we've done in this cluster is often we send an online form to just gather your responses, and then, but as well, or also as Ezio says, maybe it could be a repository of case studies. Yeah, what we'd like to hear from you. And as well, it's also, I think we want to keep this space to grow organically, but as well, maybe we want to hear, do you want to work on something more concrete? and maybe so that we can make an action plan to get there.
After
I need to plug my computer, sorry, I will just switch off the camera and moves.
Okay. After the conversation we had one day with Ezio, he was saying that we should, as a cluster, have a goal in some way to produce something with all these reflections we are doing, because it's great to have this safe space to talk about all these things, but also to share our experiences. But we wanted to maybe prepare or do something in which all these words don't go to the air and do something, which we don't know very well what's going to be. So the suggestions were a web page in which we post everything, or even an exhibition, which could be very beautiful to prepare and to do, maybe in Zaragoza, I don't know, or whatever you suggest, and or a publication that collectively could go ahead. And the idea, one of the, yes, Anne-Laure? Yes.
No, finish. I will join. I'm going to answer after. Go, keep going.
Just one thing. The idea of working with forms, with 1-2 questions only. And all of us, we answer to the question, and then we give an example, a practical example we are working on. For example, as Ezio says, could be one idea, but please, Anne-Laure.
So I like I think it's important to have a goal, and I'd like to follow up on what Ezio was saying, because I mean, web page and exhibition or future publication, for me it's a form, but it doesn't tell me really for what. So I guess it goes back to the question, and to me, what I heard when Ezio was mentioning, looking at different cases and trying to start analyzing, it's like moving to more maybe of an analytical way to think about how to then really design from the margin. What does it mean? Because it's, it evokes something for me, it evokes something for you, but what are the tools we can, or ways of thinking? And maybe for some people, it would be that they will even do something, not only, reflect on it. But so for me, at least, and that's my own perspective, is being part of that conversation is interesting, but I feel like there are a lot of perspective, and we're starting each time, it seems to me we're getting like nuggets of like ideas or direction, and then it'd be nice to start maybe putting them together and coming up with some kind of I don't know, guidelines or ways of thinking that can help us, within our work. So I think it's like the formalizing, maybe, I don't like the notion of formalizing, but like giving ourselves, some kind of tool to work on that. Sorry, Francesco. It's hard to be in a in the Zoom meeting without hearing people. So I don't know. I feel like maybe what Ezio was suggesting, to start with cases, could be a good way, and it could be our own cases, and it could be other cases, but it could be a good way to then maybe see if there are like principles, conditions, or things like that can, and then you can decide if it can help, you can decide what is the medium. You see what I mean? Is like, for me, there's I don't know what to say, if it's a web page, an exhibition, or a future publication. It's a matter of, preference or opportunity, but what it matters more is the content. So I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah. So maybe you suggest we start working on the content, and then we decide the media we use. For example, we could do it through a share Google Documents or something like that, because we have to be practical in here.
Yeah, but I guess it'd be interesting for me, like when you started this cluster, what would be, and maybe, you know, I don't know if you want to do an online form, but then maybe it's like really, what do people want to get out of it? What would be, you know, something you want to get as a person and you would like to give to someone else, whether it's your students or a practitioner that is not necessarily a designer or someone from the vulnerable community. I don't know, we can also start thinking about, like, you know, for whom are we doing this?
Yeah.
And probably not just to look at our navels and say, you know, we're doing these things. I don't know.
We have, by now, we have some materials which are all the responses to the forms. These questions were in the first form. What do you want to get from here? There were several answers, interesting answers. And then we have all the recordings of these meetings. And this is something we have. I mean, we can put it down in letters also. So yes, it's the work to do. But of course, any other? Beatriz?
Yes. So following up on what Anne-Laure was saying, maybe, and this is kind of an idea with a question to everyone, but would it be possible to do two things at the same time? So maybe when I see a web page, but not exactly a web page, something that is a little bit more active, like a platform where we share. So could we do it in a way that, for example, we have a purpose for the page, for example, a case. And here on this case, you have the reflection, and then you have some topics specifically where we invite the DESIS sharing the story.
Francesco.
I'm sorry, I'm feedbacking just because Francesco has not muted on the other.
What is happening?
I still hear it.
Francesco muted
Yeah, okay, thank you, sorry. Yeah, so maybe if we had a space for the cases, and in the cases we would have some topics of reflection that could already be kind of a model that everyone would follow, even with their own projects. But on that sense, at the end, like for example, a few months, we would have the same topics and the same ideas that we could kind of put together and compare between the different DESIS, and we have an organized based information for then proceed with a joint study or a joint new question for us to talk about. So I'm not sure if this would make sense or not, but just maybe it starts us to share what we have and then find a common ground, but we are already sharing with the larger community, having it online. So we are also showing which one of us are doing on this purpose of Crossing Fire. And then in the end, like in a few months, we compare, and then we reunite to see what another output would be. But we have kind of a base of comparison that it's same to all.
Mm-hmm.
Would that make sense? No, just an idea.
So do something open to everybody. Could be a blog or something like that, and start with the cases, from the examples.
Exactly, but like we would have kind of a structured, organized way of presenting the cases. Mm-hmm. So you will have different topics that everyone would address them, and they can be points of reflection for each DESIS with their own cases. And like these, you always compare the same at a certain time because they are always replying with the same question when presenting those cases.
Oh, okay. Now, how we would do it? This could be a part of DESIS website now, for example, a link from DESIS website or for the DESIS cluster.
I don't know how the DESIS website is done. If it's kind of an easy platform, it can be done. But we can also try to find another solution.
Which could be?
We have, so as for our DESIS, we have also been thinking about having an open platform, but this is for us to connect with other universities so students can share their projects and then connect networking. So we are viewing a few platforms. Yes. So maybe we can check if any of the platforms that we have been thinking on using for this would be also appropriate for that other purpose.
Is this things like Miro and is Miro this kind of?
No. Do you remember the name, Anne-Laure?
Yes, Discord.
Exactly.
It's for gamers. But you can create a mini server, and so community can work in, and it can be private. I guess if not, old version, and then I let you, Ezio, maybe you have another better idea. But a very old fashioned was like Blogger on Google, but you could make it private. So I guess the question is, if it's a working group, maybe you don't want to make it completely public. So it's figuring out more of a, semi-private, like a private blog or private space. So Discord would work. I don't know, but Ezio, tell us what is the platform we should be using.
I cannot. I have a digital divide. I have difficulty also to enter in Zoom and somebody else open it. But I wanted to go back a little bit to what also you and Laura said before. I think that of course you have to find. We have to find some digital something to collect the cases. But if you all agree that this is something to be done, the issue is what really we want to collect, because it's totally diverse. The kind of complexity, the kind of articulation in which the case is presented, and also for what. If I can, so I don't tell you what you have to choose, but I think that starting, in my view at least, and also in experience in different stories, because if I can say something going back many years, the change in the object that we are observing is so big that it's in a way we are coming back to when design for social innovation started 15 or 20 years ago. That was really, what does it mean to look to recognize cases that are interesting and be capable to develop a vocabulary to say why they interesting, in which way they are interesting. And in my view, the first could be to have a very simple presentation. So not to ask people very complicated explanation of the case, because we are not sure in which way this case will be used. But from now, maybe I lost something, but now we have, when we discuss, we are not referring to the same thing. We are referring to different kind of discussion. Every one of that is interesting. For instance, when we say, okay, we can be on the margin also if you are living in the center of the city, or also the students, of course it is like this, but it's a totally different interpretation. So please, let's try to understand what we are talking about. And in my view, we are a group in a network. The first is to see what the people, if we launch the idea in the margin, and maybe we launch also the idea, because at least for what I got myself, I like a lot. What does it mean to be in the Crossfire? And we try to ask to people that find to have some example that could be coherent with this first rough definition. And we ask only half a page, maybe giving in the half a page, there has to be something that make it possible to understand. So something very simple in the way that the idea can be launched in a most larger way that is possible. And so we see in the community of the design who are active in something and what they do intend for that. Because in the discussion that we have had today, there have been so many different ways to interpreting what it is. And if we want to go on, it's very good to have this wide spectrum of possible interpretation. But at least for the conversation, we have to find something, because the conversation on one possible interpretation is different from the other one. For instance, when you say it's not from the margin, but it's not for the margin, but it's from the margin, yes, of course. But also design for the margin could be part of the work. It's not it's not that we have not to do it. So if I said, if you use your capability in terms of graphic design or photographer or whatever to help the campaign and to help to make clearer the problem of prisoners, or problems of refugees, or problem of homeless, this is a way to work with them. Afterward, of course, it could be, in any case, I will stop here. I only say that my advice is not to ask something too complicated, and do not waste your time building some structure that afterward will not be used. So let's do only what is really strictly necessary, the minimum that is possible. So you can survive also without having a website if you are capable to spread the idea and to start to consolidate a language that permit afterward, when things will be clearer, you could imagine to have more articulate and structured digital tools, for instance. But at the moment, maybe to do a simple collection of half a page in which we can have a next discussion, having on the table 20 cases, and not at the moment today, I've heard only one. That is yours one. Afterwards, I know that Luis is working with the prisoners in the prisons, because I know for some other reason, but it was not on the table. So this is, in my view, the way to proceed. To have something on which we can start to say, no, look, but this is like this is like that, and to build a language. To work together means the starting point is to build a language, to be a common language. Otherwise, it's impossible to discuss.
Okay, so maybe this is the second topic in meeting with a topic. So we did reframing vulnerability. Today is the crossing fire. Thank you, Ezio. I'm talking after what you say. And then next one are gonna be power dynamics and parachuting, which are the ones who were more bold for all of the people interested. So maybe we can ask them, or you or whoever, to write half a page and then collect them all together. And in this half a page, give your view on the topic and with an example. So I agree with Ezio that we should not complicate the less complicate, the better. So maybe Francesco and I, we can collect all this, and then when we have it, give it some shape, and then share it with all the DESIS community, not just our, and then start another conversation. But it could be a good way to start, maybe. What do you think? Yeah, because I'm not very touchy with all these things, but I think it's maybe if we this way also we will say that the people who wants to do this. I mean, that there are all people who wants to really get involved in this. So we had, you are here, but I don't know if I explain myself. What do you think? What happens, Francesco? You can't speak?
I don't know.
Okay, then
Francesco, you listen to us, because maybe the problem is that you appear twice.
No, this is a picture.
Yes, it's a picture, but maybe.
But he has two devices plugged in. Try now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, but I can't hear you. So basically, I was from the browser. The browser doesn't work anymore, but I didn't want to leave because I'm recording it. So I entered also from the app. And now I understand from the app, I can hear you, which is now I've closed. But of course, if I'm in both app and browser, there is that bad noise. So I will, I mean, since we are finishing, I'm listening, and I will add, I will write in the chat, but I will not speak, maybe, if it's okay. But maybe, yes, I agree that we can, yeah, we'll this was very insightful, and we can gather our thoughts on this. Maybe I was typing in the chat, if it's okay, just wanted to check with you if maybe September and November could be other good times to meet. And also I understand that for now we actually, it sounds like we want to do the work of collecting case studies, and maybe the format in which it manifests is not so relevant at the moment. If will become in the future a website, a publication, or an exhibition. For now, it sounds like we're not so worried about the format, but we actually know that we want to get going with the work, and then we will figure out the means of dissemination, I guess.
Okay. Maybe we prepare for not now we have to rest because we need holiday, finishing the term and so on. But maybe in September or so we can make a call to ask for this with a format, but in a half a paper. Bring your opinion on the topic and an example, and we launch it on September and see which are the results. Okay. Yes. So thanks all for coming. Thank you, Ezio, for coming too. Thank you, Anne-Laure, Beatriz, Leire, everybody, Alberto. It's been very interesting. I was a little afraid at the beginning because no one was talking, but I saw you were thinking. So that's good. So thank you, everybody. And we keep working and have a nice holiday. Have a rest. And thank you. Thank you.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Bye. Thank you, Cecilia and Francisco, for organizing.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Thank you. Fran,
Stop recording. Can you hear me?
yes.
Sorry for the technical.
You will stop?
Sorry, have you heard?
Yeah, I can. Yes, just only for